The massive space station Galactic Prime hummed with excitement. Beings from 17 different star systems had traveled here for one reason. The annual Galactic Combat Federation tournament was about to begin. In the center of the station, a huge arena dominated everything else. Its walls were made of clear metal that could withstand the strongest attacks. Around it, millions of seats waited for spectators. This was where champions were made and legends were born. High Arbiter Tae Min stood on his observation deck, looking down at the arena floor. He was a Velkari, the species that had ruled this tournament for 300 years. His gray skin had the texture of stone, and his 4 arms moved with perfect control. Each hand ended in claws that could cut through steel. "Another year, another victory for our people," Tae Min said to his assistant. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. Below them, the current champion was training. Dae Sung moved like a mountain that had learned to dance. He stood 3 meters tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. His muscles rippled under his gray skin as he practiced his combat forms. Each punch could shatter rocks. Each kick could bend metal bars. Dae Sung had won 47 matches without losing even once. Other species feared him. Some refused to send fighters because they knew it was useless. The Velkari were simply too strong, too fast, too perfect for combat. "The betting pools show interesting numbers this year," said Hye Jin, the dock supervisor. She was smaller than most Velkari, but still twice the size of most other species. "The odds against anyone beating Dae Sung are 1,000 to 1. Tae Min smiled. "Still too generous." Far from the arena, in the cargo section of the station, a different story was unfolding. The human ship New Seoul had arrived 3 hours ago, black smoke trailing from its engines. It looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Captain Jin Ho climbed out of his ship, stretching his back. He was tired from the long journey from Earth's outer colonies. His ship was old, his crew was small, and his cargo was nothing special. Just food supplies and basic materials for the outer rim settlements. "How long for repairs?" Jin Ho asked the station mechanic who came to inspect his ship. Kyung-soo, a young Velkari maintenance worker, looked at the human ship with disgust. "This thing should not be flying. Your engines are from the last century. Your hull has more patches than original metal." Jin Ho shrugged. "She gets us where we need to go." Kyung-soo could not understand this attitude. Humans were strange creatures. They were small, weak, and had no natural weapons. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. They had only 2 arms and moved slowly compared to most galactic species. Yet they traveled the most dangerous trade routes and somehow survived. 3 days minimum, Kyung-soo said. "Maybe 4 if we find more problems." While Jin Ho went to arrange payment, his crew began unloading cargo. There were only 4 of them. Subin was the navigator, a small human female who looked like she could be blown away by strong wind. Namgil handled communications and seemed more interested in his electronic devices than anything else. The last crew member was Dong Hyun, who worked as their cargo handler and general maintenance person. Kyung-soo watched them work. Humans were amusing in their weakness. They needed machines to lift things that a Velkari child could carry. They moved carefully because a simple fall could break their fragile bones. It was amazing they had survived long enough to reach the stars. During his lunch break, Kyung-soo decided to check on the human ship repairs. As he approached the cargo bay, he heard strange sounds. Grunting, the impact of something hitting something else, and rapid movement. He looked inside and stopped in surprise. 2 of the humans, Subin and Namgil, were fighting each other. But it was not the kind of desperate struggle he expected from such weak creatures. They moved in flowing patterns, blocking and attacking with precise timing. Subin was much smaller than Namgil, but she used his size against him. When he tried to grab her, she stepped aside and used his momentum to throw him off balance. When he swung at her, she ducked under his arm and struck at pressure points. That made him stumble. Namgil was stronger, but Subin was faster and smarter. She seemed to predict his movements before he made them. She turned his attacks into opportunities for her own counterattacks. Kyung-soo watched for several minutes. This was not real fighting, he told himself. Real fighting was what Velkhari warriors did. They used their natural strength and speed to crush opponents. This human activity was more like dancing with some hitting added. The humans finished their practice and began discussing what they had done. They talked about technique, timing, and strategy. They acted as if their weak movements actually mattered in real combat. Kyung-soo found this hilarious. He returned to his workstation and told his fellow mechanics about what he had seen. Soon, half the maintenance crew was laughing about the humans who thought they could fight. "You should have seen them," Kyung-soo said, "moving around like they were dangerous. The female probably weighs less than my lunch." His supervisor, an older Velkhari named Wonjae, chuckled. "Humans are entertaining. They try so hard to be more than they are." The story spread through the station's lower levels. Workers shared it during their breaks. It became a popular joke about human delusions of strength. Eventually, the story reached the tournament organizers. They were planning the opening ceremonies and looking for entertainment between the serious matches. Someone suggested that watching humans attempt combat would be the funniest thing they could offer the audience. Tournament director Eun Young loved the idea immediately. "Imagine the crowd's reaction," she said. "We could have real warriors demonstrate proper technique, then bring in humans to show everyone what not to do." The suggestion was so amusing that it reached High Arbiter, Taemin himself. He approved it as an excellent way to remind everyone why the Velkhari deserved their position as galactic champions. "Make the invitation official," Taemin ordered, "but present it respectfully. We are not cruel. We simply want to give all species the honor of participating in our great tradition." The decision was made with laughter and casual cruelty. None of the aliens could imagine that their joke invitation would change everything. They saw humans as weak creatures pretending to be strong. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. In 3 days, when the repairs were complete, Captain Jin-ho would receive an official invitation to enter a crew member in the Galactic Combat Federation tournament. The aliens expected easy entertainment and cheap laughs. They were about to learn that underestimating humans was the most dangerous mistake anyone could make. Captain Jin-ho was checking cargo manifests when the official message arrived. The communication device in his ship made a formal chiming sound that he had never heard before. Namgil looked up from his repair work on the navigation system. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission from the Tournament Authority," Namgil said. His voice carried confusion. "They want to speak with you directly." Jin-ho accepted the transmission. The holographic image of tournament director Yoon Young appeared before him. She was a Velkhari female with elaborate markings on her gray skin that showed her high rank. Her forearms moved in formal greeting gestures. "Captain Jin-ho of the vessel New Seoul," she began with barely hidden amusement. "The Galactic Combat Federation extends to you a great honor. We invite one member of your crew to participate in our sacred tournament." Jin-ho stared at the hologram. He had heard about the tournament, of course. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Velkhari combat games. It was where the strongest warriors from different species came to test themselves against impossible odds. "I think there has been a mistake," Jin-ho said carefully. "We are cargo haulers, not fighters." Yoon Young's smile widened. "There is no mistake, Captain. Your species deserves the opportunity to show their combat skills alongside the galaxy's greatest warriors. We believe in giving all beings a chance to participate in our traditions." The way she said it made Jin-ho suspicious. Her tone reminded him of adults talking to small children about games they could never win. But the invitation was official, and refusing it might cause diplomatic problems. "I need time to consider this," Jin-ho said. "Of course," Yoon Young replied. The tournament begins in 5 days. We will need your answer by tomorrow." The transmission ended, leaving Jin-ho alone with his confused crew. Subin and Nam-gil had stopped their work to listen. Dong-hyun emerged from the cargo hold where he had been securing their remaining supplies. "They want one of us to fight in their tournament," Jin-ho explained. "This feels like some kind of setup." Dong-hyun was quiet for a long moment. He was older than the rest of the crew, with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of hard work. Before becoming a cargo handler, he had served in the colonial defense forces during the border conflicts with pirates. "I'll do it," Dong-hyun said simply. "Are you crazy?" Subin asked. "Those Velkari warriors are 3 times our size. They could kill you with one punch." Dong-hyun shrugged. "Maybe, but someone has to represent our species. Might as well be me." Jin-ho studied his crew member carefully. Dong-hyun had always been reliable and calm under pressure. During pirate attacks, he had kept the crew alive through quick thinking and steady nerves. But this was different. This was walking into an arena against creatures designed for combat. "Why?" Jin-ho asked. "Because they expect us to be afraid," Dong-hyun replied. "They expect us to refuse or send someone who will lose quickly and make them laugh. I don't like being anyone's entertainment." The next morning, Jin-ho sent their acceptance to the tournament authority. Within hours, the news had spread throughout the station. A human was going to fight in the Galactic Combat Federation tournament. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Betting pools opened with odds of 5,000 to 1 against any human victory. Galactic news networks sent reporters to interview the brave but foolish human who thought he could compete with real warriors. Dock workers gathered around the human ship, pointing and laughing. Some made jokes about how quickly the fight would end. Others wondered if humans felt pain the same way other species did, since the human seemed so calm about his approaching death. In the main commercial district, souvenir vendors began selling items mocking the human participant. T-shirts showed cartoons of tiny humans running away from giant Velkari warriors. Mugs featured slogans like, "I survived the human fighter," and "shortest tournament match ever." The Velkari competitors found the whole situation hilarious. Jae-won, a veteran fighter with 12 tournament victories, made public statements about how he hoped to face the human. "It will be educational," he said. "The crowd will learn the difference between real combat and human pretending." Even the lower-ranked fighters joined in the mockery. Bo Ram, who had never advanced past the second round, declared that fighting the human would be an insult to his skills. "I trained for months to face worthy opponents," he said. "This is like asking me to step on an insect." Meanwhile, Dong-hyun began his preparation. While the station laughed at him, he studied everything he could find about Velkari combat techniques. He watched recordings of previous tournaments, analyzing how the warriors moved and fought. The other humans helped as much as they could. Subin used her navigation skills to calculate angles and timing from the tournament footage. Nam-gil accessed technical databases to learn about Velkari anatomy and physiology. "Their joints move differently than ours," Nam-gil reported. "They have more flexibility in some directions but less in others. And look at this. Their inner arms are weaker than their outer arms." Dong-hyun absorbed every piece of information. He practiced in the cargo hold, using containers and equipment to simulate different fighting scenarios. His movements were not as powerful as Velkari techniques, but they were precise and efficient. Kyung-soo, the maintenance worker who had first suggested the human invitation, came by to watch Dong-hyun's training. He brought friends who wanted to see the amusing sight of a human preparing for real combat. "Look at him," Kyung-soo said. "He actually thinks those little movements will help against Velkari strength." But as they watched longer, some of the mockery faded. Dong-hyun's training had a quality they had not expected. Every motion had purpose. Every technique built upon the previous one. He was not just moving randomly. He was preparing systematically for something specific. "He is very serious about this," one of the observers noted. "Serious about losing," another replied, but with less certainty than before. The tournament medical staff prepared for casualties. Dr. Mi Kyung, the chief physician, reviewed human anatomy charts and ordered extra healing equipment. She had never treated a human before, but she expected to be doing emergency surgery soon. "Their bone structure is incredibly fragile," she explained to her assistants. "A standard Velkari strike could shatter their entire skeletal system. We need to be ready for massive trauma." Security Chief In-ho increased patrols around the human ship. He was concerned about violence from spectators who had bet heavily against the human. Some beings were already angry about their money being tied up in what they considered a pointless exhibition. "Keep them safe until the tournament," In-ho ordered his officers. "After that, the arena medical team takes responsibility." As the tournament opening ceremony approached, the entire station buzzed with anticipation. This would be the most entertaining mismatch in galactic history. The great Velkari warriors would demonstrate their superiority over the weak humans once and for all. None of them realized that their casual cruelty and absolute certainty had created the perfect conditions for something unprecedented. They had invited a human to their game, and humans had a reputation for changing the rules. The arena filled with beings from across the galaxy. Every seat was taken, and viewing screens throughout the station showed the same image. This was the largest audience in tournament history, all gathered to watch what they believed would be the most amusing mismatch ever recorded. High Arbiter Tae-min took his place in the honored viewing box. Around him sat the most important figures from 17 star systems. They had come not for sport, but for entertainment. The humans' participation had become the greatest joke in galactic history. "I almost feel sorry for the creature," said Ambassador Yeon-su from the Centauri delegation. "It has no idea what it is about to face." The opening ceremony began with traditional Velkari war dances. Massive warriors demonstrated their combat forms, while drums thundered through the arena. Each movement showed power that could crush bones and split metal. The crowd cheered with appreciation for their natural superiority. Then came the fighter introductions. One by one, the tournament competitors entered the arena. Each warrior received respectful applause as their victories and achievements were announced. These were the elite fighters from dozens of worlds, beings who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Boram entered to moderate applause. He was considered a mid-level fighter, someone who usually lost in the second round. Still, he had won 4 matches in previous tournaments and stood 2.5 meters tall with muscles like steel cables. Finally, the announcer's voice changed tone. "And now, representing the human species for the first time in tournament history, cargo handler Dong-hyun of Earth colony ship New Seoul." The arena erupted in laughter. Beings pointed and made jokes in dozens of languages. Some spectators held up signs mocking human weakness. Others started chanting countdown numbers, betting on how many seconds the fight would last. Dong-hyun walked onto the arena floor. He looked impossibly small compared to the space around him. His simple work clothes contrasted sharply with the elaborate armor and ceremonial gear worn by other fighters. He carried no weapons because humans had no natural ones to display. The crowd's laughter grew louder. This was even more amusing than they had hoped. The human looked like a child who had wandered into an adult competition by mistake. Commentator Won Shik could barely control his amusement. "Ladies and beings, we are witnessing galactic history. Never before has such a physical mismatch been allowed in our sacred tournament. The human Dong-hyun weighs approximately 70 kilograms compared to Boram's 240 kilograms. Expert analyst Sue Young added her observations. "The strength difference is even more dramatic. Velkari muscle density is approximately 4 times greater than human muscle. This means Boram can generate roughly 16 times more force per strike than his opponent. The betting displays showed final odds of 8,000 to 1 against human victory. Even those numbers seemed generous to most observers. Chief Judge Sang-hoon called the fighters to the center of the arena. Bo-ram towered over Dong-hyun like a mountain over a pebble. The Valkyrie warrior's 4 arms moved in traditional pre-combat gestures, showing his readiness to demonstrate proper fighting technique. "This will be educational," Bo-ram announced, loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "The galaxy will learn why some species are meant for combat and others are meant for cargo handling." Dong-hyun said nothing. He stood quietly, studying his opponent's stance and movement patterns. His calm expression annoyed some spectators who wanted to see fear or desperation. The judge signaled for combat to begin. Bo-ram immediately launched himself forward with devastating force. His charge should have ended the fight in seconds. 240 kilograms of muscle and bone moving at tremendous speed toward a target that weighed less than a third as much. The crowd held its breath, expecting to witness the shortest match in tournament history. Instead, something impossible happened. Dong-hyun was not where the charge was aimed. He had moved at the last possible moment, stepping aside with precise timing. Bo-ram's momentum carried him past the human and into empty air. The crowd's cheers died into confused murmurs. That was not supposed to happen. Bo-ram recovered quickly and swung his powerful outer arms in wide arcs that should have caught the human from multiple angles. Again, Dong-hyun was somewhere else. He ducked under one arm, stepped around another, and somehow ended up behind the larger fighter. "Impossible," whispered Ambassador Yeon-su. "The human is too slow to avoid Valkyrie attacks." But the evidence was right in front of them. Dong-hyun was not just avoiding Bo-ram's strikes, he was controlling the distance and timing of the fight. When Bo-ram tried to grab him, the human was already moving away. When Bo-ram swung at where he was, the human was attacking from where he was not. More disturbing was what happened when Dong-hyun counterattacked. His strikes targeted specific points on Bo-ram's body with surgical precision. He hit nerve clusters that made the Valkyrie's arms go numb. He struck pressure points that affected balance and coordination. "This is not proper combat technique," Jae-won muttered from the competitor viewing area. "The human is using tricks instead of honest fighting." But the tricks were working. Bo-ram grew increasingly frustrated as none of his attacks connected, while the human's smaller strikes accumulated damage. The Valkyrie warrior had trained to overpower opponents through strength and speed. He had never faced someone who fought with this kind of tactical precision. 20 minutes into the fight, something unprecedented happened. Bo-ram began to slow down. His powerful charges became less frequent. His arm swings lost their devastating speed. The human, meanwhile, maintained the same pace he had started with. His breathing was steady, his movements remained precise, and his attacks continued to target Bo-ram's weak points with mechanical consistency. "The human is outlasting him," Dr. Mi-kyung observed with medical disbelief. "Human cardiovascular systems should not be capable of this kind of sustained performance." 30 minutes in, Bo-ram made a desperate mistake. Exhausted and frustrated, he put everything into one final charge. Dong-hyun stepped aside and used the Valkyrie's own momentum against him, applying a joint lock that sent the massive warrior crashing to the arena floor. The submission hold was technically perfect. It used leverage and physics to overcome the strength difference. Bo-ram found himself unable to break free despite being physically superior in every measurable way. Chief Judge Sang-hoon stared at the scene in shock. He had to verify the rules 3 times before declaring what everyone could see, but no one wanted to believe. The human had won. The arena fell completely silent for the first time in 300 years of tournament history. The victory over Bo-ram sent shockwaves through the galactic community. News networks scrambled to explain how their analysis had been so completely wrong. Betting houses faced massive losses as odds shifted dramatically overnight. But the tournament. Officials had a bigger problem. According to the ancient rules established by the Velkhari themselves, Dong Hyun's victory was completely legitimate. Every technique he used was legal under existing regulations. They could not disqualify him without changing laws that had stood for centuries. "This is temporary luck," declared Velkhari Elder Sung Min during an emergency meeting. "The human cannot repeat this performance against stronger opponents." High Arbiter Taemin agreed. "One victory proves nothing. We will see the natural order restored in the next round." But they were already worried. If a mid-tier fighter like Bo-Ram could lose to a human, what did that mean for Velkhari superiority? More importantly, what would happen if other species began to question the established galactic hierarchy? Dong Hyun's second match was against Jin Woo, a speed specialist known for lightning-fast attacks. Jin Woo was smaller than Bo-Ram, but moved like electricity given physical form. His strikes came from impossible angles at incredible velocity. The arena filled again, but this time the mood was different. The laughter had been replaced by nervous tension. Spectators who had mocked the human before now watched with genuine concern. Jin Woo entered the fight with absolute confidence. Speed was his weapon, and no species in the galaxy could match Velkhari reflexes. He planned to end this quickly before the human's strange tricks could be effective. The match began with Jin Woo moving like a blur around the arena. His attacks came in rapid combinations that should have overwhelmed any opponent. Strike after strike flashed toward the human from every direction, but something was wrong. The human was still avoiding the attacks, but not in the way he had fought Bo-Ram. Against the speed fighter, Dong Hyun used different tactics. He did not try to match Jin Woo's velocity. Instead, he controlled space and timing in ways that made speed less effective. When Jin Woo attacked from the right, Dong Hyun was already moving left. When the Velkhari changed direction, the human had predicted the change and positioned himself accordingly. It was as if Dong Hyun could see the future. "The human is reading attack patterns," observed combat expert Jae-won with growing alarm. "He is learning Jin Woo's techniques during the fight and adapting in real time." This was something no other species had ever demonstrated. Most fighters developed their techniques over years of training and used the same approaches repeatedly. The idea of changing strategy within a single match was completely foreign to Velkhari thinking. Worse, Dong Hyun was not just defending. He was applying steady pressure that slowly wore down his opponent. Every time Jin Woo launched a high-speed attack sequence, he expended enormous energy. The human, fighting at a sustainable pace, simply waited for those moments of exhaustion. 25 minutes into the match, Jin Woo began to make mistakes. His incredible speed meant nothing if his attacks missed their target. Meanwhile, the human's precise counterstrikes accumulated damage and fatigue. The end came when Jin Woo, desperate to prove his superiority, attempted his most complex attack combination. Dong Hyun had seen this sequence before and was ready for it. He stepped inside the Velkhari's guard and applied a submission hold that used Jin Woo's own momentum to lock his joints. The speed specialist found himself on the ground, unable to move despite being faster than his opponent, another impossible victory for the human. Dong Hyun's third match presented an even greater challenge. Si-Jin was a powerhouse fighter who specialized in absorbing damage and delivering crushing counterattacks. He was built like a mobile fortress, with thick hide that could deflect most weapons and strength that could bend steel beams. The strategy against Si-Jin should have been simple. No matter what techniques the human used, eventually he would have to actually hurt his opponent to win. And Si-Jin was designed to take punishment that would destroy most beings. The fight began with Si-Jin allowing Dong Hyun to attack freely. The Velkhari fighter wanted to demonstrate that human strikes were meaningless against superior physiology. He stood still and invited the human to do his worst. This confidence lasted exactly 10 minutes. Dong Hyun's attacks were not trying to overpower Si-Jin's natural armor. Instead, they targeted specific nerve clusters and pressure points with surgical precision. He struck areas where even small amounts of force could disrupt biological functions. More shocking was the human's reaction when Sijin finally began his counterattack. The powerhouse fighter's punches could shatter concrete, and several of them connected solidly with the human's body. Any other species would have been crippled or killed. The human absorbed the impacts, adjusted his stance, and continued fighting at the same level of effectiveness. "This is medically impossible," Dr. Mi-kyung announced to her shocked staff. "The human's pain tolerance and injury resistance exceed anything in our databases." Sijin had trained his entire life to break opponents through overwhelming force. He had never faced someone who could function normally after taking hits that should have ended the fight. The psychological effect was devastating. Sijin began to doubt his own strength when his most powerful attacks failed to stop the small human. This doubt led to hesitation, and hesitation led to mistakes. Dong-hyun exploited every mistake with clinical precision. He used Sijin's own strength against him, redirecting the massive fighter's attacks and using the momentum to apply leverage-based techniques. The third victory was even more impossible than the first two. Security Chief In-ho reported growing unrest among Velkari spectators. Groups were forming to protest the humans' participation. Some demanded rule changes to prevent such unnatural fighting techniques. Others called for the tournament to be stopped entirely. They refused to accept what they are seeing, In-ho explained to his superiors. The idea that a human can defeat Velkari warriors challenges their entire understanding of reality. But the most disturbing reports came from other species representatives. Beings who had accepted Velkari dominance for centuries were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. If humans could win through intelligence and adaptability, what other assumptions about galactic hierarchy might be wrong? Ambassador Hai Wan called for emergency diplomatic sessions. "This human's victories are creating political instability across multiple star systems," she warned. "Species that have submitted to Velkari authority are reconsidering their positions. The tournament, that was supposed to demonstrate eternal Velkari supremacy, was instead revealing cracks in the foundation of galactic order. And standing at the center of the chaos was one human cargo handler who simply refused to accept that losing was inevitable." 3 victories had established a pattern that terrified the galaxy's rulers. The human was not winning through luck or tricks. He was winning because he possessed advantages that no one had recognized or valued. Now only one opponent stood between Dong-hyun and the ultimate prize. Champion Dae-sung waited in the final match, representing 3 centuries of Velkari dominance and the last hope of maintaining the established order. The galaxy held its breath, uncertain for the first time in living memory about who would emerge victorious. The championship match drew the largest audience in galactic history. Viewing stations across 17 star systems showed capacity crowds. Government leaders canceled meetings to watch. Military commanders studied the broadcasts for strategic implications. The outcome would determine more than just tournament victory. Champion Dae-sung had not spoken publicly since the human's 3rd victory. He had spent the time in intense training, reviewing footage of Dong-hyun's matches and consulting with combat experts from across the Velkari military. "The human uses unconventional techniques," General Minsu advised during their final strategy session. "Do not attempt to understand his methods. Simply overwhelm him with superior force before he can implement his tactics." Dae-sung nodded silently. He had dominated 47 consecutive matches through raw power and perfect technique. No opponent had ever forced him to adapt his fighting style. The human would be no different. High Arbiter Tae-min made a rare personal appearance in the arena. He needed to be present for this moment. Either the natural order would be restored through Dae-sung's victory, or the foundation of Velkari society would crumble with his defeat. "Citizens of the galaxy," Tae-min's voice echoed through the arena. "Today, we witness the final test of strength, skill, and natural superiority. Our champion Dae Sung faces the human challenger in combat that will determine the true hierarchy of species. The crowd's response was different from previous matches. Instead of laughter and mockery, there was nervous energy and genuine uncertainty. 3 victories had transformed the human from a joke into a legitimate threat to everything they believed. Dong-hyun entered the arena to scattered applause from unexpected sources. Beings from species that had never challenged Velkari authority were quietly cheering for the underdog. Others watched in fearful silence, unsure what his victory might mean for their own positions in galactic society. Dae Sung's entrance shook the entire station. 3 meters of perfectly trained muscle and bone, moving with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. His gray skin bore ritual scars marking his victories. His 4 arms moved in ancient combat forms that demonstrated power capable of crushing vehicles. The size difference was even more dramatic than in previous matches. Dae Sung outweighed Dong-hyun by more than 4-1. His reach advantage was enormous. His striking power could literally split the human in half. "This is the ultimate test," commentator Won-shik announced with forced confidence. Dae Sung represents the pinnacle of Velkari warrior breeding and training. No being in the galaxy can match his combination of strength, speed, and technique. But analyst Su Young had studied the previous matches carefully. The human's victories suggest advantages we may not have recognized. His stamina, adaptability, and tactical intelligence have proven effective against different fighting styles. Chief Judge Sang-hoon called the fighters to center arena. For the first time in tournament history, the traditional pre-match ceremonies felt tense rather than celebratory. Everyone understood that more than individual glory was at stake. Dae Sung looked down at his small opponent with barely controlled rage. This insignificant creature had made a mockery of Velkari superiority. The time had come to restore proper order through overwhelming demonstration of natural law. "You have entertained the crowds with your tricks," Dae Sung said loud enough for the audience to hear. "Now face a real warrior and learn your place in the galactic hierarchy." Dong-hyun remained silent. He had learned everything he could about the champion's fighting style and psychological profile. Dae Sung was technically perfect, but had never faced an opponent who could adapt and evolve during combat. The judge signaled the start of the championship match. Dae Sung attacked with the fury of 3 centuries of unquestioned dominance. All 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, striking from multiple angles simultaneously. His initial combination should have ended the fight within seconds. Instead, Dong-hyun demonstrated something that shocked every observer. He was not just avoiding the champion's attacks, he was controlling them. Every dodge, every sidestep, every duck under a swinging arm was precisely calculated to put Dae Sung slightly off balance for the next exchange. "Impossible," whispered General Min Soo from the competitor viewing area. "The human is making Dae Sung fight at his pace, not the other way around." The champion's frustration grew as his most devastating combinations failed to connect. He had trained his entire life to end fights quickly through overwhelming force. Extended combat was not part of his experience or psychological preparation. Dong-hyun, meanwhile, began implementing techniques specifically designed to exploit Dae Sung's strengths. When the champion tried to use his size advantage, the human used leverage and momentum to redirect that mass into vulnerable positions. When Dae Sung relied on his forearm coordination, Dong-hyun created situations where the extra limbs became disadvantages rather than assets. 15 minutes into the match, something unprecedented occurred. Dae Sung was breathing heavily. The undefeated champion, who had never been pushed beyond quick victories, was experiencing physical fatigue for the first time in his career. The human showed no signs of slowing down. His cardiovascular system evolved for persistence hunting. Across vast distances, allowed him to maintain peak performance far longer than any other species could manage. "The champion is tiring," Dr. Meek-Young observed with medical disbelief. "Human endurance capabilities appear to exceed our previous calculations by several orders of magnitude." Dae-Sung's technique began to deteriorate as exhaustion affected his precision. Moves that had been flawless in training became sloppy and predictable. His forearm combinations lost their devastating coordination. Dong-Hyun recognized these changes and adjusted his strategy accordingly. Against a fresh Dae-Sung, he had focused on defense and attrition. Against a tired Dae-Sung, he began applying offensive pressure that the champion had never experienced. The psychological impact was devastating. Dae-Sung had built his entire identity around being unbeatable. The idea that a small human could force him into extended combat challenged his fundamental understanding of reality. 30 minutes into the championship match, desperation replaced confidence in the champion's fighting style. He abandoned the technical perfection that had won 47 consecutive matches and relied instead on raw aggression and overwhelming attacks. This was exactly what Dong-Hyun had been waiting for. Emotional fighting created openings that technical fighting never allowed. When Dae-Sung charged forward with blind fury, the human was ready with precise counters that used the champion's own momentum against him. The end came suddenly. Dae-Sung, exhausted and enraged, threw everything into one final devastating combination. Dong-Hyun stepped inside the attack, applied a joint lock that used all four of the champion's arms against each other, and sent 3 meters of undefeated warrior crashing to the arena floor. The submission hold was technically perfect. It used physics and leverage to overcome strength differences that should have been insurmountable. Dae-Sung found himself unable to break free despite being physically superior in every measurable way. Chief Judge Sang-hoon stared at the impossible scene before him. The undefeated champion of 3 centuries was trapped by a human cargo handler who weighed less than 70 kilograms. The declaration came in a whisper that the arena's sound system amplified to every corner of the galaxy. Winner by submission, human challenger Dong-Hyun. 300 years of Velkari dominance ended in a single moment of stunned silence that stretched across 17 star systems. The arena remained silent for nearly a full minute. Across 17 star systems, billions of beings stared at their viewing screens in shock. The impossible had become reality. A human had defeated the greatest Velkari warrior in recorded history. Hi. Arbiter Taemin was the first to break the silence. His voice carried rage and disbelief as he stood from his honored viewing box. "This result is unacceptable," he declared loudly enough for the entire arena to hear. "The humans' fighting techniques violate the spirit of honorable combat. I demand an immediate review of this match." Chief Judge Sang-hoon looked up at the High Arbiter with confusion. "All techniques used were legal under tournament regulations. The victory is legitimate according to our laws." "Then our laws are inadequate," Taemin snapped. "Combat is meant to demonstrate natural superiority, not clever tricks that allow inferior beings to defeat their betters." But the tournament's ancient legal framework, created by the Velkari themselves to prevent challenges to their authority, now protected the human champion. Every rule had been followed. Every technique had been within established parameters. Their own legal system prevented them from changing results retroactively. Velkari Elder Sung Min called for emergency sessions to address what he termed the human problem. Representatives from across the Velkari government gathered in crisis, meetings that lasted through the night. "This is not just about one tournament," Ambassador Haiwan explained to the assembled officials. "If humans can defeat our greatest warriors, every treaty, trade agreement, and territorial boundary based on Velkari strength becomes questionable." The political implications were staggering. Galactic civilization had been organized around the principle of Velkari physical superiority for centuries. Species that had accepted subordinate positions were already sending diplomatic messages requesting renegotiation of existing agreements. The Centauri delegation withdrew their trade concessions. The Rigel colonies demanded military protection guarantees be revised. Even species that had never challenged Velkari authority began asking uncomfortable questions about the true basis of galactic hierarchy. Meanwhile, galactic media coverage shifted from sports entertainment to serious political analysis. Journalist Yu Jin's reports on human capabilities sparked fear and fascination across multiple civilizations. We must ask ourselves, Yu Jin broadcast to billions of viewers, what other assumptions about species capabilities have been wrong? If humans possess advantages we never recognized, what does that mean for our understanding of galactic evolution and civilization? Research institutes began emergency studies of human physiology and psychology. Military academies revised their strategic assessments. Even the Velkari High Command ordered comprehensive reviews of human colony locations and defensive capabilities. But the most dramatic reactions came from other oppressed species. Beings who had accepted Velkari dominance for generations began organizing resistance movements. If a single human could defeat their greatest warrior, perhaps united action could challenge their entire system of control. Dr. Mi Kyung published medical findings that shocked the scientific community. Human endurance, adaptability, and pain tolerance exceeded previous calculations by enormous margins. More disturbing was their ability to learn and adapt tactics during combat situations. Human neural plasticity allows real-time strategy modification in ways no other species demonstrates, her report concluded. This suggests cognitive advantages that may be more significant than their physical capabilities. Security Chief In-ho reported increasing unrest throughout the station. Velkari civilians were gathering in angry groups, demanding that their government take action to restore proper order. Some called for military intervention to prevent the human from leaving. "The station! They cannot accept what they witnessed," In-ho explained. The idea that humans might be superior in any way challenges their entire worldview. But Dong-hyun himself seemed uninterested in the chaos his victory had created. When reporters tried to interview the new champion, he declined to make political statements or grand declarations about human superiority. "I came here to represent my species with dignity," he said simply. "The tournament is over. Now I want to return to my crew and continue our cargo run." This calm response frustrated beings who expected either arrogance from victory or fear of retaliation. The human acted as if defeating the greatest warrior in galactic history was simply another day's work. Captain Jin Ho and his crew found themselves under protective custody for their own safety. Angry crowds had gathered around their ship, and several attempts had been made to damage their engines and strand them on the station. "We need to leave as soon as possible," Jin Ho told station authorities. "This situation is getting worse every hour." But departure was not simple. The Velkari government was considering legal challenges to prevent the human champion from leaving their territory. Some officials wanted to study Dong-hyun to understand how he had achieved the impossible. Others proposed changing tournament rules to prevent future human participation. However, these discussions revealed the fundamental problem. With their position, any rule changes that specifically excluded humans would acknowledge that humans possessed advantages significant enough to require special restrictions. The betting houses faced financial catastrophe. Odds of 8,000 to 1 had seemed conservative when offered. Now they owed massive payouts to the few beings who had wagered on human victory. Several major gambling operations declared bankruptcy within hours of the championship match. Tournament director Yoon Young submitted her resignation rather than face responsibility for the disaster. "I authorize this participation as entertainment," her statement read. "I never imagined it would destabilize galactic civilization. As news of the human victory spread beyond the immediate viewing audience, reactions varied dramatically across different species and civilizations. Some saw it as inspiration that strength and size were not the only paths to victory. Others viewed it as a threat to established order that needed to be suppressed. 3 days after the championship match, the new Soul finally received departure clearance. Dong-hyun and his crew prepared to leave the station that had become the center of galactic controversy. The human champion carried no trophy or ceremonial recognition. Tournament officials had refused to hold the traditional victory celebration, claiming that exceptional circumstances made normal procedures inappropriate. As their cargo ship pulled away from Galactic Prime Station, Dong-hyun returned to his routine duties, securing supplies and maintaining equipment. He had broken their champion and their rules not through aggression or dominance, but by simply being human in ways they had never understood or appreciated. The phrase, "never invite a human to your games unless you are prepared to lose them," became common wisdom across 17 star systems. It served as a reminder that underestimating others based on assumptions about strength and capability was the most dangerous mistake anyone could make. Behind them, the tournament that had celebrated Velkhari's superiority for 3 centuries struggled to understand what had changed. The rules remained the same, but the game would never be the same again. Humanity had announced its presence in galactic civilization not through conquest or diplomacy, but through one cargo handler who refused to accept that victory was impossible. The galaxy would spend decades trying to understand what that meant for everyone's future.